Hello and welcome to our IG Live. We took a little bit of a summer break and now we are back. And today I'm going to be talking to Giselle Shardlow, who is of Kids Yoga Stories. And I'm so happy to be talking to her. I've had the pleasure of getting to actually meet her in person, which doesn't often happen because, we're spread out all over the globe. But I've gotten to meet her, I think, 2 times. And she is going to be talking to us today about yoga and mindfulness and the benefits that it has for kids, especially for kids from multicultural families. So we'll find out exactly what she means by that and how it can be beneficial. But just so you see, I have a few of her books here. Hello. Hold on, let me get her on here. She has a lot of new ones out too. Good Night, Animal World, a bunch of the books. These are kind of adventure stories where they go different places, including here's one Spanish for Costa Rica. Hello, good to see
Hello,
you.
my dear. So good to see you.
So nice to see you. I was just saying that we have actually met in person, which is pretty unusual for members of Multicultural Kid Blogs because we're all scattered.
Right.
And even now that you're on the other side of the country, we haven't seen each other since you moved away from the West Coast.
I know, it feels like yesterday.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And until I remember how old my kids were, and I think the one that was a baby, he's 10 now, so that makes it feel like a while ago, but it doesn't seem like that long ago.
No. Yeah, my daughter's 12 now, so that was 11 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's good
great.
to see you, and it's also pretty amazing because I first got to know you mainly through your books, but now Kids Yoga Stories has really branched out, and you have all different sorts of products, and I mean, you just have so much more than when I first got to meet you. So, well, why don't we back up first and you can introduce yourself and Kids Yoga Stories.
Great. Lovely.
Right.
So as you said, when I was living in San Francisco, when we met, my first project was to publish my yoga stories. So back in the day, and I think you've got a few of them, you've got the Sophia's Jungle Adventure, that's also in a few different languages, and Anna Rainbow Colored Yoga Mats. These were the 2 books I initially published when my daughter was 9 months old. So I was living in San Francisco by myself. I didn't have family around. My husband was, a long commuter. And he said to me one day, you need to find a hobby right? Besides talking about our child, right? And so I was the one, taking my daughter to all the playgrounds in the city and that. And so I just thought, I've had these books on my computer and in printouts. I still have them, like document form printouts of these books that I'm really passionate about integrating movement into story, because as you know, I'm obsessed about children's books. So I had been a teacher. I take my teacher training. I think, the teacher training was like 10 years prior to that. And so I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this and give it to my daughter, if nothing else, right? And then I started to share with people, friends, and then I got into making my own website, and I met people like you, and it just that was 11 years ago or so. So it's just gone from there. It's been amazing what a gift to be able to bring together my passions of traveling and teaching and yoga and being a mom.
And I think it's amazing because your books and your products, you really do bring so many things into it. Like you said, I mean, they travel to different places. And then if you haven't seen these books before, they actually show kids how to do different poses that go along with the story. And then, of course, you have a lot of other products now in addition to that. But how did you get interested in yoga to begin with, especially yoga for kids?
Yeah. So when I was a baby, when I was little, a toddler living in the middle of Canada, my mom used to play on the television. We only had, one channel, watched, I think, Sesame Street. And then we had this yoga channel. So my mom used to practice yoga. That's when it kind of started. And then in university, I went to like a beginner's class, and it wasn't quite the right fit. But then every time I came back to my mom, she would always take me to her local class. And then in Sydney, when I was there, I found my yoga home, was where I did my yoga teacher training. And so when I finished my yoga teacher training, you have those moments, Leanna, where you're like struck, like I couldn't sleep. I had all these ideas, and I just thought, oh my goodness, if I had had this wisdom while being a teacher, because I taught nationally in Guatemala and in Sydney at that time, so I was traveling around, and I thought, gosh, if only I could have had this wisdom in my teaching, not only for having in a story so that children could move, but also the mindfulness piece of it and the breathing and the karma yoga. So all the facets of yoga I thought amazing. So that's where I actually started the business and published the books.
And what are some of the benefits? Oh, sorry, up a little bit. Yeah, what are some of the benefits of mindfulness and yoga? Why would that have been so? I mean, that seems kind of maybe an obvious question to anybody who's done yoga, but why is that so important to have in the classroom? And especially, I know we were talking about how it's especially important for multicultural kids, you know, who live maybe a little different lifestyles than the average. Why is this so important for them?
Right. So that was back 10 years ago or so, and now even more so. So I'll tell you about back then as a young teacher before having, I had some way for children to, because I work with a lot of children whose English was their second language. If they were able to access the story and literature through movement, it would just make so much more sense. And then you're bringing together to make it meaningful and relevant to them through movement. So we learn through our bodies, right? So that was one big for them to connect to their creativity and their imagination through their bodies and their mind as well. And also some calming techniques. So I saw a lot of children who were, you know, their engines were running high and very stressed. And in those days, you know, we didn't know so much. We were starting to know about mental health, but now it's really exploded. So we didn't, as a young teacher, I just thought this child needs some help or assistance, but I didn't really understand what was really under the iceberg. And then now you think about during the pandemic, you know, kids yoga has exploded in the last couple of years because we can see the difference of just taking a deep breath. Something as simple as that will completely alter a child's mood and an adult. Right? So their self-regulation, how they manage big emotions, and we can go into that in a bit. But, you know, it's beyond the flexibility and strength and really about also the mental health and well-being of children.
Right. And I love how you're also bringing up the kids who are learning English as a second language. I mean, one, that's a much more stressful situation and also harder for them probably to connect to the story. And I've always, I've talked to a lot of authors about how important it is as a way for the kids to learn the language and to kind of feel more at ease in the language. Stories are such a great way to do it, but yours also incorporate movement, which is just this whole other element, as you say, to help kids learn through their bodies and also to help them kind of relax and have more mindfulness. You were saying maybe we're using the term mindfulness. I wonder if you could maybe explain it a little bit more, because I feel like it's one of those things that gets thrown around a lot, and I think we all think we know what we're talking about, but maybe it'd be better to just make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, great question. So you think about the grandfather of mindfulness, right? Is John Kabat-Zinn. He did his schooling here in Massachusetts, near where I am. So he says, I can't remember the exact quote, I can get you the exact quote, something like, mindfulness is being in the present moment, noticing your thoughts with non-judgmentally. So what he means by that is, there is a misconception that, you know, we sit cross-legged on the top of the mountain in silence, right? And I remember my mother-in-law said to me years and years ago, she said, I went to yoga once. They told me to clear my mind. I don't want a blank mind, right? So, and that is not the point. The point is to notice your thoughts and have not a judgment about them, but let them pass on by. So imagine if we could just sit silently, right? We call it meditation, but let's just take away that word. Just sit silently. Or stand silent. Notice how active our brains are, and just notice. And get curious about what is and all that, but that's the judgment piece of it, right? But just noticing those thoughts and letting them pass by. That's mindfulness. And so the benefit of that, right, is that when we start to notice in our minds, so, you know, right now, for example, you know, we're thinking, am I going to say the right thing? And how many people are on here? Or, I don't know, did I wear the right top? Or, you know, all these anxiety, or what am I going to do after? And did I push play right? I don't know, you know, so our heads are full of all of us live in the past, some of us in the future. You know, there's a lot of anxieties and stress, especially right now. We're living in a world where there's a lot going on for a lot of us and a lot of busy schedules. So for us to take just a moment, take a deep breath and be in this moment. This is all we have. And it allows us to connect at a deeper level, right? Without any of those worries and concerns.
And I love that you mentioned about clearing, like that it's not clearing your mind, because I think that I've heard that from a lot of people that holds them back from doing yoga or meditation because they think, well, I can't do that. I tried it and I couldn't. I kept thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. And so they think, okay, so this isn't for me. But you're saying it's not even about that. I mean, obviously that would be a goal at some point, but that it's just noticing your thoughts and letting them go, which is what a great skill to teach to kids.
Right.
Because I've talked to parents that are dealing with kids who have these intrusive thoughts and they don't know what to do about them. They're confused because they don't know where they come from. Like maybe it's something they heard, they saw on TV or social media or whatever. Right. And then they don't know how to let it go.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's everywhere. Of course, I gave birth to one of those children who needs the work more than of course. But she is my muse, right? And I watch, like you're saying, I watch her anxieties and I watch her stressors. Mm-hmm. She has to come to the party. And what I can do, even if you're in a situation you think, oh, well, my child, my group of children are not interested. The best thing is for us to start with us. With us. So my daughter in San Francisco, I used to sit, nothing fancy. I'd just sit down on the couch or on the floor and I would just sit quietly. And she would come and she would be in my lap when she was a baby, or when she was taller, she came. And since moving to Boston, I made myself a little cushion. I don't do it every single day. I'd love to say that, but I don't, right? I don't do meditation every single day. I go through periods of time where I'm sitting silently for years at a time, and then I take a break for a year or so, whatever, like that, right? You got to go with your flow and not beat yourself up about it, right? But even sitting silently, her coming in, now I'm thinking when she was 3 or 4, where the tantrums really were picking up, right? And that was just her way of saying, I can't be in my own body and thoughts. I don't know how to cope with it, right? And so she'd come and sit on my lap, and just her feeling my breath coming and going in quiet was extraordinary, right? She didn't stay long, right? But the ripple effect of my own practice made a profound difference. I had a very, very difficult, and I've talked about this in my community. I don't hold back about the challenges I had as a mom. I'm a real sensitive, very different for me. So I had a really hard time. And what I found is, after 12 years of parenting this little amazing being, is that it starts with me. Even though I read every book out there and look to see what strategy, whatever. And I was a teacher, right? So I had the skills, but really it's up to us, to regulate ourselves so that we can co-regulate with others. And I think about this too, Leanna, about our children, because I'm Canadian, my husband's Australian, and she was born in the States, and my parents were from England. So we're like this multicultural family, always having to travel, not always, by choice, right? Traveling to places, the longest for, right? That's a long airplane ride. Mm-hmm. A small person who doesn't like to sit still. So, there's all these situations. And then when we get to these places, right, the dysregulation of the change of schedules, meeting new people, the excitement, the downtime, there's a lot going on. And I know a lot of people in your community experience the same thing, or even moving, right? So we moved a few times, right? That's a lot. That's a lot for a child to take through. So noticing the practice, the yoga and mindfulness practice, what benefit that could bring in those situations. So even on an airplane, just taking a few breaths. I teach my daughter, put your hand on your chest or on your belly and just take a few deep breaths. It doesn't have to be any more fancy than that. Or if she's having a moment where, classic, there's a night before we come back to Boston, the last few times she's been in just having a total meltdown saying she wishes our family in Australia could be near our friends in Boston. You know, it's just like, how do you, and it's such a heartbreak, right, Leanna, when we have our families all over the place. But having that moment to connect, to calm ourselves and say, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. It's going to be okay, right? And my latest that I've learned is, as an adult, putting one hand on our heart. Mm-hmm. There's a really famous yoga teacher, the name escapes me, I can look that up too. She suggests we say, how human of me. Oh. So just taking a moment to pause and take a deep breath and think, how human of me. Mm. And then thinking our children, like how human of to be able to think, you know, of course she's going to be confused playing for 24 hours to go visit people that she maybe sees once every couple of years, you know?
Right.
It's a lot.
Right. And that rings really true for me. I know when we go to see family in Costa Rica, or even just family on the East Coast that we don't get to see very often, there's so many emotions. First of all, like you say, the travel, and then you have to get kind of used to this new culture once you get there with people you haven't seen in a long time, and a lot of emotions, and then having to leave them a few weeks later. You know, that is, but like you say, when we are non-judgmental, when we're more accepting of our own feelings about it, and we can model that for them, and it also kind of changes how we treat them. Like we can be more and be kinder. And it sounds weird to say we should be kinder to our kids, but it's also a really stressful time for us. Yeah. For the same reasons as them, and plus we're trying to manage it, and are we going to get to the plane on time, and saying goodbye to our loved ones. And you know, there's so many things that sometimes I feel like, I know for myself, I'm not always very patient. Right. With them. All you have to do is get your shoes on. And it's like, well, no, there's a lot of, they're saying goodbye. There's a lot of happening. And so I like that, but I love that saying that, how human of me.
Here, perfect. This is a lovely book. They were the co-authors of Yoga Journal, from what I understand as well. But this is it's all based on the Yoga Sutras as well. Like you're talking about character education, practicing communication. She's that one who just talked about how human in me. And I think too, like, that next step of, you know, I have to be mindful of, you know, this is hard work, raising a child who, you know, we don't have family nearby. So raising a tricultural child. However, in the other part of my brain saying, what a gift. What a gift. I'm so blessed that, you know, we've got these passports and she has, you know, access to the world. And, you know, so you kind of like balancing of like, you know, hashtag first world problems that. Right. So again, that's mindfulness, is noticing all those voices going on and noticing where it sits in our bodies and helping our children navigate these situations, because that's the reality, right? I mean, I can't change that. That's where she comes from, right? We can't change that about our children. We need to help them embrace it.
And right? I like your point about noticing how, I mean, mindfulness helps us notice our thoughts and also notice how it feels in our body, because that's such a great skill for them to have as they get older, to get those signals. Because we talk about that, you know, a lot, managing big emotions, especially like anger, you know, is to try and catch it before it, you know, you're about to explode. And part of that is noticing how it feels in your body when you're starting to get angry or when you're starting to get stressed. And so having these mindfulness practices are so powerful, because they start to see these things before it becomes a big problem, and they can, like you say, start to regulate a little more. And it's been about 20 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to make sure people know the resources that you have available for Kids Yoga Stories. We've talked about the books. I don't know if you want to talk about some of the others that you have, resources. Yeah. I get the newsletter, and I have to say people should sign up for that. Not only do you find out about all these amazing sales that you do all the time, but you also often have like reflections, things that are happening in your life, or just different mindfulness kind of snippets or meditations or things that you wouldn't find anywhere else. So I do encourage people to sign up for the newsletter.
Beautiful. I love my Mindful Mondays. Yeah. I share something that's going on for me, and then we share a little meditation moment. So speaking of the breathing, these breathing cards are by far our most popular product, and they're great because this is something you can take with you traveling or wherever you are. And there's a whole bunch of different breathing exercises you can pull out and you can do. There's instructions that makes it really easy. And then you've got mindfulness cards. These are really accessible. Our cards, so you can just pick out a mindfulness activity. Or, you know, if you're out and about and you want to practice some partner yoga with you and your children, those are really popular as well. And then you've got our yoga books.
Partner yoga.
Sorry?
I was just saying my kids love the partner yoga. That I've noticed that that's something that they tend to really go to. And I should mention for people who aren't familiar with her products that it's fun because it makes it very easy. Like as somebody who's very busy, and I've done yoga before, but I'm not like an expert on it. But I can just pick it up. The instructions are very easy. And a lot of times you incorporate things like animals or something with nature. And so it's not just like do this pose. It's like, oh, we're going to be a dolphin. And so for kids, I think that makes it really engaging, you know, whereas otherwise it might be hard to get them to actually sit and do yoga or the mindfulness practices. It's all broken down in a really, really accessible way for kids.
Right. Yeah, and I think added to that piece is that you're talking about, someone said the other day, you always know when children's books are written by teachers because there's multi-layers. So one of the layers you talked about is travel, right? Because that's my biggest passion. So, you know, we go on journeys with our books, the Goodnight Animals in the World for bedtime. Africa, we've got an African safari, which I used a couple resources from people in the MKB to help me make sure the authenticity of the animals and everything in Tanzania. So that was amazing. Yeah, so you'll see we're tripping around. There's Africa. And you have Sophia's Jungle Adventure, and then Bali, Hello Bali. So that's a global aspect that we're traveling in different places. Yeah. Lovely.
Well, I love it. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us. This was just fun for me to get to talk with you, and that's going to be beneficial for other people as well. So if anybody's missed this, we'll have this up on Instagram in a few minutes, and then later we'll have it on YouTube. Again, this is Giselle Kids Yoga Stories. You can find the link to it. We'll have it in the notes. But I really encourage everybody to check out her resources. They're really amazing. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, dear. So great. So lovely to see you.
Same. Thanks everybody for joining us.